Well, hey, Al, Craig. So we had an election a week ago, and we're still counting. Yeah, I don't remember an election lasting this long, other than, of course, Al Gore and the dangling Chads and all that stuff. And boy, that turned out great for Al. And us, I guess, because after that was the whole revenge via global warming due to CO2 thing. And of course, the punishment for Trump being elected the first time was Hillary Clinton and her coup attempt. Hearings going on as we speak. So we're supposed to just accept this as, well, the TV stations have called a winner. Obviously it doesn't work that way. And no one's certified the votes. And they're still counting, which is as bizarre as it gets, right? I mean, much bigger states, Florida, California, places like that, done at the end of the day, just like always. Why is this going on? Oh, it's so tight. Now I have to be really careful. So, well, aren't you supposed to be really careful the whole time? This isn't like we just made this up, or is it? Because, that's the problem is, right before the election, the rules started to change. And, it's no wonder. We knew that the Democrats had been sending lawyers all over the country for months, specifically to try to change the rules, especially, under the whole premise of, well, it's too dangerous for this virus for people to just vote like they always have, which is bizarre because, if you didn't want to go to the polling station and actually physically be there, you could do it the way people always have as an alternative and get an absentee ballot. You request it, they check your name, you're registered, they send it to you, you fill it out, sign it, everything goes back, they know who you are, you know that you voted. It's very secure. We've been doing that forever. But suddenly they come up with this new idea. Oh no, we're just gonna mail ballots out to every address that anyone's ever been at that has voted, or maybe that any address that we have. It's hard to say exactly what the criteria was, but for well over a month we've been seeing pictures and videos of ballots being found in all kinds of random places, sometimes big piles of them. Everyone I think anticipated trouble with this election. Certainly, I'm sure Trump expected trouble. And it's not like, we're all living in some weird vacuum. I mean, yes, if you watch CNN or MSNBC or something, maybe you're living in a bit of a vacuum. But the rest of us, there's news out there and you see these things. And it's worrisome because, we always hear, a couple people, dead people vote, or, people that moved away. We can accept a few hundred ballots that were cast dishonestly. And we know people who aren't really supposed to vote from time to time. But that's not what we're talking about this time. From allegations being made, and I've been looking into this stuff like everybody. Some of it's staggering. I was under the impression that our voting machines now, there was this air gap, right? That the voting machines weren't hooked up to anything to make sure everything's secure. And then, when you're done voting, that information's gathered up and sent to the central polling place, then they release it. But that's not the case. This stuff's all connected all day long. And, of course, it makes sense because when you start to see results come in, they have to get those numbers from somewhere. And the place they get those numbers is from the servers, the management companies that run the voting machines. And it ends up that a bunch of these are, they're run out from a company in Spain. It has their main server is in Hamburg, Germany. It's just crazy stuff. You're like, no, this can't be true. Oh yeah, all these are all from Canada. Like, we can't do that here. I'm amazed. But then I'm watching a video, and I've posted this on my Coastal Conservative page, the link to this video. It's about an hour long. Underneath I sort of noted some times, maybe to skip ahead. It gets pretty much in the weeds. But if you like the technical side of why this makes sense, it's a great description and kind of horrifying, because you see, oh wow, there's a lot of ways that this system can be hacked into and manipulated. And of course, the most amazing thing is, of course, there's really not much evidence left unless you look at very specific small things. Just the weird little things that the computers sort of track, disruptions and stuff like that. So these guys know what to look for, but they've done this before. They've, back a couple of years ago, they looked at some elections, I think it was in the Dallas area, and they found all kinds of stuff where votes had started to switch around. We've seen evidence of that. You hear the story of the one machine that, was like 6,000 votes for Trump were switched to Biden, and but they caught it and they fixed it. And it was just a glitch. As they describe, it's like, look, these don't have. That's not a glitch. Okay, a glitch is like it shorts out or won't work. I mean, you've got stuff that glitches. No, to switch things like that is not a glitch. That's something that's programmed into it. And when they say, well, some of these they maybe they didn't get the update, and it's like, no. Remember, this stuff isn't supposed to be updated. It's supposed to be kind of sterile, right? You'd expect the voting machines to be sort of like, I don't know, a stamp of approval, like we've looked at it, it's clean, it's ready to vote. Something, but that's not really the case. There's a lot of potential to get in these things and really do what you want. And obviously, you can't go crazy with that. It's going to be too obvious, right? But this time it's kind of too obvious. It's like in big numbers. You look at those swing states, and wow, what a coincidence. The turnout is like way, way above ever, and it's like, well, this is a big election. But, okay, so they're saying at this point, he's got more votes than Obama did in 2008. I know a lot of people hate Trump, but I don't know if that was enough of a motivator to get them out there to vote for Biden in those numbers, more than voted for Obama. But let's say it is, okay? But at the same time, and they're saying, again, Joe had the most votes ever for a president election. The second highest number of votes was Trump in this same election. 8 million more votes than he got last time. And very sizable amounts of minorities. People, they said, Trump's a racist. And it ends up maybe not so much. People recognize that, one, those stories are ridiculous. And two, his policies have been really good for everybody. Not just, there's always just helping out his rich buddies. Which is ironic in that the wealthiest people in the world are huge Democrat donors, right? So, here we are, and we're looking at all these potential problems, like in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh, where people aren't allowed to observe. They're kept away. It's like, the tables where they're sorting through the votes and separating from the envelopes. And again, this is in the new mail-in ballots that were just thrown out there. And they won't let people within this. I think the closest table or tables, the row of them was something like, let's say, 12 feet. And then there's another row beyond that, farther away, and then another row beyond that. That's as close as they could get. They had asked to be allowed to go closer, and they're given, okay, you can go 6 feet closer, and then the people in the front row moved to another row farther away. You don't do that kind of stuff and expect to not be called out, or maybe you do. It's just a weird way of doing it. You would think everyone knew this was a big deal election. I thought the claims that there'd be this huge blue wave were absurd because I didn't even think anyone would vote for Joe. But, admittedly, I mean, a lot of people don't like Trump for whatever reason. And so I get that. But at these numbers, it's, and then specifically in these 5 swing states, that's where you see all these weird problems, So, like machines, like the vote counting stop. Okay, we're going to stop overnight and we're going to come back and we're going to continue because we got all these additional ballots to count. And so they start back up like 3 hours later, and in that time, all of a sudden, the gap between Joe and Trump is like narrowed way up. It's like, well, how'd that happen? I thought they weren't even counting. Oh, well, we got these in, we got these in. Of course, you have to expect everyone that voted using the new system voted for Biden overwhelmingly, and it's just statistically ridiculous. I've had friends say, well, of course, all those early votes were Biden votes because they really got it out there. And I've got to say, I know a lot of Trump supporters, and a bunch of them, almost all of them I know here in Pawleys, voted early because it was convenient. Go down there and take care of it and thought, well, I'm going to save time. Which, ironically, I show up on the day, voting day, and I was in and out in 8 minutes. There was nobody there. I think there was a good line. This is about 11 o'clock in the morning. I think there was a pretty good line early. So, everyone took advantage of that because, it's easier to fit in your schedule. It's kind of a shame because I like voting day. I like seeing everybody, in the community out there doing their thing. But obviously there was a huge turnout this year, huge like never before. But again, how huge? In some of these cities you're talking about, like there's a 50 to 60% turnout, which is really considerable. And but in some of these cities, it was like 90%. And, some claims that this is even more than they have registered. They say, well, no, those are the voting roll totals for 2 years ago. But, okay, how many more voters did they add in big cities? Because last I checked, people were moving out of big cities, But maybe I'm wrong. But it's so many coincidences. And, little numbers, okay, that's just silly stuff. I understand. Oh, these dead voters and all that. If you're talking a few hundred, that's not going to make a difference. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So, this is worth looking into. And I am positive that people were observing because they're anticipating this. And these are knowns. But the biggest concern right now is there's not a lot of loyalty in D.C. for Trump. The people that work in the administration, a bunch are holdovers from the past, from administrations past that, they're progressives. Their loyalty is to the machine. And they just have to wait Trump out, and there'll be a more friendly atmosphere for him later. But they're career bureaucrats, they're technocrats. They're whatever you want to call them, but there's a ton of them. And they like things the way it was going. Bigger government, more power for them. That's what they're into. Obviously, if they're into changing the world, making it a better place, we would have had a lot better things happen, right? Think about it. When it comes down to government, how great education, ever since they took over, education hasn't gotten better. Social services, still the same percentage in poverty. There's, this. If you deal with government at all, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. And the numbers of people that work there are staggering. But nobody seems to make a decision. It's like right now, if you have to deal with the IRS right now, good luck. No one's going to answer the phone. Nobody opens up the mail. It's super frustrating. Although, as I understand it, D.C. is fairly empty as far as the offices go. So, the president's been able to get some good work done in their absence. And I'm hoping that some of that good work was, taking advantage of a quieter place for his core people to really, look into this whole thing before the election hit. Because everything I understand is that you really have to have people looking to see these things happen, because after they happen, especially with the voting machines and the computer stuff, If you're not looking for it, you can't look back and see it. It's not like there's a record of these specific things happen. It actually happens in between where the votes are taken and it's ride through different servers all over the place. You can grab it en route, change a couple numbers, and it comes out the other side, and all it knows is that it's all server. It doesn't know that anything happened to it on the path. And so you have to be looking, if you knew ahead of time that, well, there's 2,000 votes over here, and then it goes over here, and it's like, well, those are gone, and now it's been switched to this guy. Then something happened. So, we'll see. We'll see how they do. Evidently there's just tons and tons of people signing affidavits. I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, you can get in serious trouble if you lie in affidavits. And they're signing these things saying, hey, I saw this happen. I saw this happening. And every variety of thing. It's like every trick they had, they were using. And again, you don't do that if you have every confidence that you're going to win clean. You wouldn't want anyone to be able to, to approach you with doubt. And I got to say, I have nothing but doubts in this election. There's nothing that really looks clean, from the polls being wildly optimistic for Joe for a long time, which, puts people off sometimes. It's like, well, maybe I'd vote for Trump, but I don't know. It doesn't look good for him. I'll do something else. To, even Fox News, quick to, well, Arizona is a known thing, which they're still counting a week later, and the margins get narrow. And you see just the news reports and all. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, come on, it's time to do Biden, Biden, and poor old Joe. They wheel him out there, and he's still giving his same old speeches, and around the kitchen table and worried to death, and talking about pre-existing conditions, which is, Joe, you don't insure pre-existing conditions. Those people go into a pool. You don't insure for something you already know happened. Somebody please tell him how this stuff works. Healthcare and insurance are two different things. We need to fix healthcare. And Trump's done a lot of good stuff for that, with drug pricing and stuff like that, which ironically, with all of his, the drug companies are not happy with Trump because they're going to have to sell their drugs at the world price, the price that anyone else buys it at, the lowest price, whereas we used to pay huge prices. So they're not real happy with him, and so it's no wonder that the news of the 90% effective vaccine comes out after election when they knew about it at the end of October, and that's Trump was hoping that was going to come out. Shenanigans, right? But old Joe is like, we're gonna do all these things. Like, dude, Trump and his crew did all that stuff months and months and months ago. I mean, even though the TV won't give Trump or any of those guys credit, they did a whole lot to try to get their hands around this, but the virus turned into a political thing. It is, and it's been used all over the world like this. And the countries that didn't turn into a political thing have gone on their merry way. They're not having these huge second waves and all that. They're not worried about it. They're getting on with life because it's a virus. It's going to be there. But the vaccine is great news. Should be. But, it's funny. The Democrats, I don't know if I can trust it. Like Trump's mixing it up in the basement next to Joe. I don't know. It's crazy. So this election is no surprise in a year like this, right? But for you Trump folks, I wouldn't give up. There's very compelling evidence that big stuff happened. And you can hear my phone keeps dinging. People want to tell me. And it's true. A lot of folks have been sending me great videos and really good information. And it's stunning. I mean, if you look, you will find it. And it's not a bunch of crackpot stuff. It's not a big conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy. There's bad stuff that's been going on. I mean, we knew that from the time, as soon as Trump was elected. I mean, Maxine Waters out there, impeach 45, and, just they had the daggers out, and they haven't quit, since the day he was elected. And they're certainly not going to let up much now unless they're sort of shut way down, like, hey, you guys did some bad stuff. So, hey, maybe if we're lucky, we'll get the Durham report and Barr will be the hero we hoped he was, and all these people will be exposed, and they'll be, the Democrats will be forced to accept it when their win is taken away from them, and they're forced to accept the reality that their side's been doing bad stuff. And, if that doesn't happen, their side will continue to do bad stuff. And for my friends that think that's ridiculous, just look at the evidence. Where are we exactly in the big progressive movement? How have things progressed? What really has happened? The promises they made, they did not fulfill. The warnings that we conservatives gave have been fulfilled. It's there. You can find it if you look. But you're not going to find it on the first 2 pages of a Google search. You're not going to find it on CNN. Remember, it's 6 companies own pretty much all the media outlets. They control the message. And they're the big money that control the Democrat Party. And when you ask, well, why in the world would they want to mess with, good old capitalism? And, a guy that wants to charge them more in taxes. And the fact is, they know the Democrats are in power, they're in power. And you can see what they're trying to get to is that point where they run the elections so they know how they're going to turn out, because they don't want to have to switch directions. They like growing the government. They like the government running health care, running education, running every aspect of our lives, and look at the big winners after this virus, the big businesses that have taken over, and suddenly it's just, you can get anything you want, Amazon will drop it off, it'll come in the brown truck. And meanwhile, all these little businesses, these folks are forced to wear masks for 12 hours, they're uncomfortable. Masks do make people sick. Remember, it's like, all these new infections. By far the majority of these people wear masks all the time. Masks aren't protection from this. It's just not. But there are really good treatments. I mean, the good news is at this point, if you're so bad off you wind up in the hospital, and chances are good that most people can get through this even when you get sick from it in a couple days. But if it's really bad enough you got to go to the hospital, still only 7% of the people that end up in the hospital end up dying. And that's morbid stuff. But this is a virus. It's a dangerous one for people who are in bad shape or susceptible to this. But you got to think about it. I mean, when you hear people dying, usually there's some reason they're in the hospital, and then something takes them out. It's like, well, it's an infection. It's usually almost inevitably some infection. Well, that's a virus. It's the same deal. I mean, something's going to take us out, right? So if it's not getting hit by a chunk of space rock or something, it's maybe a little virus or something like that. When we're weak, but it's just there's too many people who are experts who really know this stuff, who've studied pandemics and understand how the whole societal part of it, everything. Too many of them have signed along and said this is a horrible idea. We've got to stop it. If you're 70 plus and you've got pre-existing conditions, be very careful. But the rest of you, just get back to life as normal, because it's more important to get our economies functioning again so that people can feel like they're attached to a society again, so they can feel healthy again, so they can go out and do things like they do. We're social animals. We need to do that. And wearing the mask thing is, it's weird. It's like, we don't do that. That was never a good idea. It's never, I keep saying this, and I'm sorry, because I know so many people are like, look, I got to wear it if I got to get things done. I know. See, that's the ridiculous thing about it. Why are they suggesting we do these things? Why are they suggesting we accept the results of an election that's not even done yet? Why do they keep suggesting that they can teach our kids better than we can, or better than teachers can for that matter, because these are technocrats that are actually making these decisions, not learned scholars, or maybe they got some kind of credential, but it's we see too much evidence of this nonsense. And, Trump was making some headway. You can hate on the guy's approach to negotiation all you want, but things have improved vastly in this country as far as the economy goes, as far as business goes, as part, the function of government. Because government's not supposed to make our decisions for us. We're supposed to make decisions for the government. So it's good to get back to that, and it's good to look at elections quizzically, and it's really good to demand that our elections are without compromise. That's what we had. I absolutely had faith in our elections. And knowing what I know now, I don't have any faith in this election. And that sucks. Because that's the big thing we really had going for us. And we need to get that back. And, I'd made the comment earlier this week that it was really up to the accuser at this point, to make the case. But the accused also needs to make the case that they weren't doing the things that we're accusing them of doing, if that makes sense. In other words, look, if you guys go through all this extraordinary effort to change rules, to skip the legislature and just have courts change rules on these mail-in ballots, which is a violation of the Constitution. If you're going to allow polling places to be run by people who won't allow observers and tolerate any of that, then I've got to be suspicious. You're acting in a suspicious manner. So I think it is on them. It's like, explain to me why you guys are doing all this sketchy-ass crap. And instead of that, they're telling us, no, as Whoopi said, suck it up. No, we've dealt with this for the last 4 years. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's been lies, proven lies after proven lies. Not going to suck it up. But I'm just wondering, if this does get overturned and we find out that there's been a lot of fraud, is Whoopi going to suck it up? I have a feeling they're probably going to pitch a big fit. And it's funny that, they're accusing us. And, it seems to me all the Trump people are being pretty calm. We're letting the system do its job. We're not rioting. But I can't say if we all feel like we were robbed that we're going to stay calm. Because we're patriotic people. And we don't like to see our country messed with. And they're messing with it. And we know it. These issues have been known for a long time, years. And very little has been done about it. At the very least, once we get past this, we've got to demand that elections are looked at seriously. For the longest time, you don't have to have IDs. Not everyone can have an ID. No. We need to go back to elections that have IDs, that are verified, that are secure, that we can all have faith in. Otherwise, we blow it. We lose this republic that we have. And that would be an awful shame. Thanks for listening, and have faith. One way or another, this will be worked out, and we'll go on with our lives. But I think it's going to turn out a little differently than some of our blue friends might think. Have a good day.